Welcome to the Liquidity Event, a show about all things personal finance with a laser focus on taxes, financial independence, and equity compensation. Hosted by AJ and Shane of Brooklyn FI, each episode will focus on a personal finance topic, some driven by news headlines and sometimes driven by listener questions. And sometimes you'll just get two money nerds rambling about what they think is interesting. Just a quick note before we get started, this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered tax or investment advice.
Hello and welcome to the Liquidity Event. We are your hosts, Shane Mason.
And I'm AJ Ayers.
And this is episode 116, being recorded on August 27th and airing on August 30th. A quick reminder for your listeners, we will answer your questions on the pod. If you leave us a message, you can disguise your voice and use a fake name. If you're shy, the link is memo.fm/the Liquidity Event. AJ, how we doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you? Papa Parmigiano, as your name says. Even though our listeners can't see that we sometimes name ourselves funny things in our podcast recording program. I was not feeling creative because I was having some audio issues. So today I'm just Aj.
Aj. The genie from the lamp.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm going to Italy tonight. That's why
Parmigiano.
Yeah.
We're in Italy.
I thought I was going to be so much ready for Italian just based on all the Spanish I've been doing over the past 3 years. And we went to an Italian restaurant last night and I couldn't pronounce anything. And my friends were making fun of me because they we're like, what are you practicing? I was like, oh no, I sound like that guy.
Yeah.
In Mexico trying to practice his high school Spanish. I should probably just not even try. But yeah, Rome tonight, or red eye to Rome. And then AJ, you're going to hate me. I don't know where I'm going after that.
Oh my God.
There's no I-10.
I can't even.
Not a hotel booked. Not an Airbnb reserved.
Yeah,
just me against the world, solo dolo.
Speaking of which, we were going to talk about our Brooklyn FI Fantasy Football League, of which I always auto-draft. I have no idea what's going on, but I am interested in the punishments for the losers. And last week you had said I have to go to Burning Man, which I think that's like too cruel and unusual. Like I'm not doing, like that's just absolute. That's like a hard no.
Come on, that would be so great. 3 weekends in the desert.
I have an alternate proposal for you, which is that you get to pick a random city for me to go to with no I-10. And I have to I have nowhere to stay, nothing to do. And you just show up and you hand me a boarding pass and I have to figure out what I'm doing.
Oh, not no. So right. I booked this flight. This dovetails well with why I booked Italy, because I was at camp last week and it was a nightmare. Worst camp I've ever, I love camp, but it was the hardest camp I've ever done. And on Tuesday or Wednesday, I was I have 15 minutes of internet during camp. And so I just pulled up Google Flights.
It's like prison.
Yeah, it's a little prison-like. It is. There's a lot of prison elements to it, and apparently you can just pull up a map on Google Flights now and pick one way. Mm-hmm. And there was a super cheap flight on Delta nonstop out of JFK to Rome, and I was like, hell yeah, let's go. Let me get out of here. You couldn't. Now the return flight, that'll be a little trickier. Norse Airways budget airline. But yeah, but that'll dovetail with if you do lose, if you get last place, I'm just going to pull up the map potentially at the airport with you and send you to fucking Kansas City or Duluth, Montana. Yeah.
Home of the Chiefs.
Definitely anywhere. I will search New York Times 36 hours in, and I will make sure
worst place ever.
Well, I'll make sure that they haven't covered it. It'll be like Cape Coral, Florida, or it'll be. There better be no results.
Can I bring my golf clubs though?
I'm going to send you to El Paso. It'll be. Let me think. What would be the worst for you? That's what this whole podcast is going to be. Just us dunking on each other. By the way, we have no articles for you this week, listeners.
Just kidding. No, yeah. What would be the worst place? I mean, honestly,
no, you're using rented clubs. I'm going to send you to Vegas.
Oh God, no!
Send your ass to it.
For the love of God.
Oh man, can it be international?
Yeah, they can be anything. Yeah, I'll show. All I get to do is show up with my essentials. Toiletries. A weekend bag.
Be careful. I'm gonna send your ass to El Salvador. The unbusiest place that shows up.
You drug me. I wake up in a Delta One pod. Whoa, we are shortly landing in Moscow.
Oh God! No, you need a visa for that. Ooh. All right.
Anyway,
we didn't think about this live on the pod, but I like this result. Burning Man, you're right. Too cruel and unusual. And yeah, no, we're not doing that. And also like
anything that's going to, I was thinking about Burning Man, and I was like watching coverage, and I was like, I would honestly rather eat a live tarantula than go to Burning Man.
Here's the thing about Burning Man. I've never been, but I have friends that go because I have a diverse friend group and I put up with this part of their personality. They go. I just got a message yesterday from a friend that was like, oh my God, Burning Man, she's Colombian. Burning Man is coming up. There's extra tickets. You can go. $6,000 RV, totally kitted out RV. I'm like, $6,000? Yeah. She's like, it's half price. It's really bougie. It's like full of people that need air conditioning.
A friend of mine who works in the hospitality industry in San Francisco, she goes and she was like hanging out, and like someone was like treating her like the wait staff just because she knows how to make a cocktail. And someone was like, she's like, I don't work for you. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it was in this like $100,000 like kitted out. Anyway, I don't want to talk about Burning Man. I do want to talk about
what do you want to talk about this article?
The dramatic turnaround in millennials' finances. So Wall Street Journal has come out and said millennials, previously way behind their parents, previously worst generation ever, series of bad financial meltdowns, all of a sudden, in 5 years, we've turned it around. And now we're doing better than boomers and Gen X. So good for us. Everything's fine. Agree, disagree?
Well, hold on. The article's like 10 pages long. Yeah, interesting article. Just goes to show that all...
Before we get into the article, I just need to highlight the best... I love reading the comments on these articles because these articles are basically just pulling together studies and press releases from various news agencies. And in this case, it was the St. Louis Fed that put this out. But so I always like to read the comments on these. The best comment was, as a boomer whose goal was to make life as miserable and difficult as possible for an entire generation, I feel that I have failed.
That was definitely written by a older millennial.
Oh, for sure.
That was catfishing. Yeah, fuck yeah, that's a good one. It depends on which website the article comes from, right? Like, but the Wall Street Journal definitely leans a lot harder to the right in terms of the people that are commenting. I don't think they have any type of thresholds for leaving comments. There's a lot of like fuck Joe Biden comments in there. A lot of thanks Obama, like unironic. Thanks Obama, like just millions of them, which is about. And the New York Times has like the 3-paragraph long in-depth analysis of how this would impact
from a federal judge or whatever who's like just commenting.
And the New York Times is like their picks that they'll elevate to the tops, and like there's voting on them, whereas the Journal just has like a cesspool of RNC attendees. Yeah.
All right, so just like quick highlights from the article so our audience knows what we're talking about. Basically, millennials are now wealthier than previous generations were at their age, and we can't believe it either. And basically the reason for this article is saying is that we have a lot more, we hold more assets in real estate and we hold more in the stock market. And just for some comparison, average household total wealth by generation in Q1 of this year, baby boomers had $78 trillion, and the millennials had $14.2 trillion. Gen X, $39.09 trillion. Silent generation, who are slowly dying off, a little less than 20%. So baby boomers still have most of the wealth. Let's just be clear. Just to make that very, very clear. And a significantly more than Gen X, which I find interesting. But so the big headline here is like we turned this around so quickly, right? So the median household net worth of older millennials born in the 80s, that's you and me, bud, rose to...
Bro, when I read that...
median household income rose from $60,000 in 2019 to $130,000 in 2022. So in 3 years, we more than doubled our median household income. So that's pretty significant, and that's what this article is leaning on mostly, right? That really quick turnaround. We go into a pandemic behind, we come out of the pandemic well ahead.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of thoughts there. First of all, just putting millennials and their wealth in a headline or in an article, I think gets a lot of clicks because we've just been enjoying this. For some reason, our generation gets covered a lot more than Gen X. It really was sad to see this. Like, I'm glad that we're doing well, but it was a bummer to see that we're doing better than Gen X at their age adjusted for inflation.
Yep.
Should it be that bad? I mean, you're supposed to do better than the previous generation, but just kind of like Gen X being sandwiched between boomers and millennials and not having the attention or like the focus on them. Yeah, they continue to get the shaft in that generation. But yeah, I mean, we have 25% more wealth than them. That's crazy. That's a lot. I mean, 5% is a big number when it comes to wealth.
20 and 25 is huge. Yeah. I love this quote. I love this quote. They're no longer lost, she said. They're found. So we've found our wealth. All it took was a global shutdown.
So
go ahead.
But where's it coming from? Like, is everyone doing better, or is it just the people that had homes?
Just the people that had homes. So the crux of this article is basically if you bought a home before 2020, based on the way that housing prices have increased and the interest rate that you likely got and the home equity that you've been able to build, that is what is accounting for this dramatic leap here. Now, in order to have bought a home prior to 2020, a millennial, let's do the median age of millennials, which is 34 right now. So you would have had to have been 31 in let's call it 2019. You have to have been 31 years old in 2019 in a major metropolitan city making the median income. You would have probably had to have, let's just keep our numbers easy here, 20% of $1 million house as a down payment. So you would have had to have $200,000 saved at that moment to buy a house. Now, how many of us, dear old millennials at age 31, had $200,000 liquid ready to go to put into a down payment on a house?
I did. I just pretended I didn't. All those years, I was breaking.
Not a lot of folks, right? So where did this money come from? I'm going to hazard. This article doesn't say this, but I'm going to read between the lines, and I'm going to say that money, if you were able to do that, you either were in a very low cost of living area, you got lucky, or you tapped your boomer parents for that down payment. So those boomers who were already ahead were able to pass that wealth on to the next generation and kick them ahead of the rest of the generation, which is why this article also highlights that we have this much bigger wealth gap. So yes, we're ahead, but there are fewer and richer people who are more ahead. And for those who did not have that nice little bump from their parents or get that nice little bump from being lucky in the right place in the right city at the right time with the right degree to get the right job, those people are falling further behind than previous generations. So it's not all good news, as it never is.
Wealth inequality, yeah, it's the guillotine's going to fall at some point. I don't know when it's going to drop, but it's the pressure on. I mean, there's this idea that in America right now that we're in a vibe session or in a recession that's not real. Like, I think something like 46% of Americans think that we're currently in a recession, despite unemployment being single digits, like low single digits, being at almost full employment, and like the stock market setting record new highs every day because the economy isn't working for them. They're working 2 or 3 jobs. They're making minimum wage. They're making $15 an hour. And they're like, the economy can't be at full force. Like, we can't not be in a recession because I can't pay my bills. Yep. That's a function of wealth inequality and a function of obstinance in Congress and us, the poor getting poor and the rich getting richer. So shout out to the millennials that had down payment assistance. I really did enjoy the reading, about, I don't know a nicer way to say this, but you said had to have $200,000 for a house in a major metropolitan city. Yes, you and I and all of our friends do live in these types of places, but the article really does highlight a lot of people that live in these quote unquote flyover states. This person bought a 3-bedroom house, 33-year-old for $90,000.
Cigarettes and a bottle of beer. Yeah, I saw that.
$90,000 for a 3-bedroom house in Nashville, and I was like,
Yeah. So 20% of that is $20,000, which by that point you probably had in your 401k to borrow against, and you could probably scrape $10,000 together. So that math starts to math a little bit more. That starts to seem more attainable. And again, picked the right housing market, picked Nashville, which has exploded. So good job on this. Yeah, this person is literally thinking they're lucky stars. They chalk it up to luck.
And the best thing about this is that housing prices never go down. That's the most exciting part. I didn't get the response I was expecting from you.
My response is I was waiting for you to finish so I could leap down your throat.
You gave me the cold 1,000-yard stare when I said housing prices never go down. So please just go buy them up.
God, you guys, housing prices do go down. They really do. Even in major metropolitan cities like Los Angeles and New York and Palm Springs. Anyway.
Have you ever heard of a lovely little city called Detroit? It was one of the wealthiest cities in America for 50 years, up until the gutting of America and the exporting of all of our jobs in the 80s. Yeah. There's all kinds of individualistic reasons why houses go down in value, whether the industry of that town. I don't know what industries would be leaving at this point? Like manufacturing's gone. You can't really take services from us at this point, right? Like I guess there's lodging or like logging.
Just unplug the internet. That's a way to kill an American city. Like, what are we going to do?
I guess Amazon could move from Seattle to Texas, pull an Elon and try to avoid, well, I guess they already don't have income tax there. So yeah, like how is a service? I guess there's going to be a tourism industry. I guess global climate change is going to wipe out Miami, or New Orleans is going to suffer a lot from hurricanes.
Yeah, I was going to say climate change. Yeah, climate change is the one that's going to, I think, cause the reshaping of American cities, right? Miami seems, that's the hottest one because so much money came there. Yeah, no, New York is indestructible. What are you talking about?
Build the wall.
Yeah, climate change. Do you see Twisters, by the way?
Yeah, indestructible. No, I saw the other 6 Glenn Powell movies that came out this year, though.
Oh,
did you
Twisters?
See it?
Oh, I love Twisters. 11 out of 10. A fantastic experience. Movies are back, baby.
Sydney Sweeney wasn't in that one, so I didn't watch it.
No, her brunette counterpart was, though. Daisy Edgar-Jones.
I watched Alien Romulus over the weekend, and my favorite tweet about it was the only Latina in the movie somehow got pregnant in space.
Oh, that's not nice.
Sorry, spoiler.
I think.
What did you think about Twisters?
What? Oh, it was just great. It was like a classic movie formula. Like finally, someone was like, "Oh, I don't know." For the first time ever, I felt like a movie wasn't trying to like over-explain everything. I mean, it's obviously a very simple premise, but I just thought it was like, you know, a good amount of like tragedy and heartbreak, a little bit of feel good, a lot of redemption, a little bit of complicated plot lines, love triangle. Like it kind of had everything. You know, acting was fine.
You don't ever do this. I never heard you come in here and be stoked about a movie that you saw.
I know, right?
It's kind of throwing me off right now.
I always trash everything. I genuinely enjoyed it.
My hand is in the mousetrap, waiting for it to snapshot. Where do you want me to do here?
And then patriarchy.
Yeah, there it is.
No, genuinely loved it. What were we talking about? Oh, climate change and destroying cities. Right. So in Twisters, basically, you know, the plot line is these people live in Tornado Alley, which was also my nickname in college, folks. Actually, it was Boot and Rally Alley.
He's not joking.
Actually, my dad used to call me General Sherman because I would march into rooms and leave a path of destruction in my wake because I was just so messy.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right. Twisters, climate change. So people live in these basically like disaster prone areas, and the tornadoes like they know the tornadoes come in to like destroy everything they've worked for, and it's really hard to rebuild because, you know, insurance is basically impossible to get in these communities because they're literally in the path of the tornado. And this article like kind of touches on that, where it's like, oh yeah, housing is great, except they're not talking about the fact that these houses are uninsurable in some parts of California and some parts of Florida. So that's hurting. They're not talking about the repairs. They bought these houses 20 years ago. So how much does it cost to actually repair these houses? So like, I think it's painting the real estate industry always gets to paint the rosiest picture because they have so much data without filling in the lines, right? They say like, oh, this is how much equity everyone has. It's like, well, what about HELOCs? Like, are there loans against that equity? Like, are people actually making these payments? Like, where's the foreclosures happening? Are people actually living in these houses, or are they renting them out to other people, which is, you know, blighting cities? So there's my rant that I think this data is a lot rosier than the reality.
Yeah, I mean, housing prices, this is a function of a lack of supply. Like if we fix the problem with one of our big problems in America, this will drive down the wealth of the millennials.
Right.
And lack of housing is the reason. And I'm also very curious if we're going to pull a boomer here and do the NIMBY stuff that the boomers did when it comes to building affordable housing units. I think that we will. I don't think that we're a special generation at all. I think that we're going to be just as self-interested and self-obsessed as the boomers were. I don't think you can really blame people for wanting to get their own bag before they care about the next generation. I don't know. I don't think we're any more altruistic than them.
Well, of course, everyone hates capitalism until you wake up one day and you're 36 and you own a house and you can feed your family. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, this makes sense. You know, this actually does make sense. Right. So there's a bit of that. But yeah, this article is one of those, like, it gives us something to talk about. Like, do you feel like our generation is doing better? Do you think we turned it around after the pandemic?
Well, first of all, we haven't talked about the most important part of this article, which is
the skydiving accountant. Sorry.
It's going to glaze over 16 minutes in, and we haven't touched on the skydiving accountant.
All right, please tell us about the skydiving accountant, who is another. I'm sorry, we had a hypothesis that there were no other cool accountants, and ladies and gentlemen, we found a 40-year-old skydiving.
DMing this guy.
He's on the flight with you to Italy tonight already.
Might be. I mean, it's not that interesting, honestly. But yeah, there's an article in here there's a section in here on, wealth inequality. There's a section on real estate. There's a section on phantom wealth, about how 401ks have increased dramatically in value over the past 5 to 10 years, which feels like phantom wealth because it's in a liquid thing that you won't touch until you're 70. I feel that way too. Like, it's really great. It's really fun to stuff a bunch of money into your 401k and watch that number go up. But there is something less fun about it being in there, right? Like, your first couple of years, you're like, this is great. Like, I'm getting wealthier. And then you're like, I'm not going to see that for 40 years.
Whenever
35
I hear
years?
that though, I'm just like, but like,
it just feels different.
Right. But like, that's the whole point. Like, you can't touch it. If you could touch it, it wouldn't grow. Like people cannot get that through their heads. They're like, oh, I can't touch it. I'm like, bro, that's literally the point.
But there's something so satisfying about having $15,000, $20,000 in a high yield savings account and just being like, oh, I don't have to worry about anything. And like not having a credit card balance and having 15K in a high yield savings account or whatever your number is.
Totally.
Just being like, oh. I mean, the 401k is like great, but like tapping that means you have to file a tax return if you want to touch this money.
Yeah.
You have to contact your accountant.
Question though, we talk a lot about financial independence, right? We talk about like retirement, like that's all great. Like, cool. You got 7 figures in the bank. You never have to work again. Financial independence. That's cool. I think financial independence is what you just described. I think that's a great measure of financial independence, which is like, okay, yeah, I can't stop working forever, but I don't have credit card debt. I'm comfortable in my housing situation. I can afford, I'm spending less than I make, and I have I have a fully funded emergency fund. So if shit happens, I'm covered. Like, to me, that's certainly a form of financial independence. So for those of you listening who are like, fuck, I'm never going to retire. Like, if you have those things, like, pat yourself on the back. You are in a great position to change careers, to take some time off, to go on those vacations that this article says millennials are so obsessed with. Like, I don't know. I think can we just like celebrate that for a moment as like the highest form of success? Like, you're on your way.
For sure. I mean, to circle back to your question about how I feel about the generation in general, there's different subsets of people that you and I interact with. I feel like there's our clients, which I had dinner with one last night, who are doing the best out of our generation. They can afford to pay us to be their financial planner. That's costing at least $5K per year.
They have tax problems, aka they're making so much money that they need help to reduce their taxes. Right.
And then there's like the average middle-aged or middle millennial that are like my friends that are in like their 33, 34. I have a lot of them that are some of the best in their industry. They're making mid-6 figures, but they're living in LA and New York. And like to turn the corner is just really hard, and they're probably going to be working until they're 70.
And they're not having kids because it's too expensive. Like, why would you have a kid if you can like barely keep it together on one income? Then you get 2 incomes. Okay, maybe if you're dinks, double income, no kids, you can live a pretty nice life in New York or LA. But like, add a kid in there and like forget it. Like, goodbye family vacations. Like, goodbye nice apartment. Like, you're moving to the suburbs. Like, the math doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. So yeah,
Sorry,
different
I interrupted you. Yeah.
No, you're good. And then there's like the people that I don't know that are like in Ohio that are like never made it out and are working as like at the dollar store, and those are the people that are going to be operating the guillotine here in about 15 years when they're never going to be able to retire. And these are the people that I think that resonate with Trump, right? And resonate with this whole idea of like, sure, Kamala's not going to change anything for me. Right. Yeah. Even though she probably will much more than Trump, but he's going to come in and just be like, the system's fucked. And this is why he resonates with people. The system's fucked.
Everything's fucked.
Of it.
That's a compelling argument, right?
Yeah.
I had a conversation with let's call them an elder liberal the other day, and they said something which really pissed me off, which was like,
wait, elder liberal. Give me some more details on that.
Just someone who's, in their retirement ages, who's very, excited about Kamala, very liberal, New York Times, podcast, crossword puzzle, very smart, yada, yada, yada. And they said something along the lines of, Biden didn't get anything done, and neither did Obama. And I was like, I'm sorry. I was like, this is not a contentious conversation. Like, this is a lovely conversation. You know, you're in my home, everything's great. But I'm sorry, Obama didn't get anything done. What do you call fucking Obamacare? What do you call getting healthcare for millions? I don't care if you don't like the policy. Like that, it was an insane thing to get done in modern politics, in any history. Like to be like, hey, I have this radical idea we've been trying to pass for 200 years, and it fucking passed, and it's still here 2 presidents later. Like this is crazy. So I don't want to hear that. Anyway, I don't want to get into politics, but do not tell me that a president didn't do anything. Like presidents do accomplish things. So stop parroting that like lazy language.
Yeah, it bums me out when people don't actually look at the legislation that's been passed or think about that. They just think more big picture. Like an elder liberal is probably thinking about FDR's, getting us out of the Depression or some shit like that. Because that's what her or his parents' version of a liberal is, right? Like giant works like TWA and like building the Hoover Dam and shit like that, which is cool.
Which I think we need again.
But the Inflation Reduction Act, like, is also very cool. And like the CHIPS Act, or we're making billions of dollars of investments in chips, which is semiconductors, which is way more important than people realize or think about, considering we're
going to be reliant on our enemies in 10 years if we don't catch up, right?
Well, yeah, and the hacking that's happening like at the nanoscale, and like we're currently very dependent on Taiwan, which is on the other side of the Pacific Ocean and right next to China, which has a ton of military power. I don't have to get into it, but yeah, I think that's a huge, that's 2 things that come off top of mind over the course of a 4-year presidency, amongst kind of restoring faith in American diplomacy abroad. Yeah,
and not actually showing a recession despite what people feel. Right. Yeah. All right. So millennials are doing okay. I want to switch gears to
Obama killed fucking Osama bin Laden. Right. Shut up. Shut the fuck up. What did Trump do?
Anyway,
floated the deficit and then killed a Zal-Kawari or something.
Anyway,
have you seen Shane Gillis's? No, you haven't seen. You wouldn't watch Shane Gillis's stand up. It's too.
No, I would not. I wouldn't watch any stand up. Anyway. Listener question, asking for a friend.
Okay.
So I got a listener question about buying a car. So I need to buy a used car. I'm going to spend between $20,000 and $30,000 on this used car. Should I buy it with cash or should I finance it?
Well, luckily, somebody on this podcast recently.
I had.
Just go off, Glenn. I'm not even going to stop you. Just go.
No, it's okay. No, this was an interesting lesson because I was so. When you are an expert in something and then someone presents you with misinformation and treats you like an idiot, I get very upset. So anyway, I'm buying a used car. I'm buying a 2021 Mazda CX-5. Did a ton of car research. Great safe car, cute little mini SUV, good for toting around the city, not too fancy, so if it gets dinged, I won't get upset. Anyway, go to the dealership, kind of treated like shit at the dealership, like I have an appointment, they're talking to other people. Anyway, I'm pissed. Long story short, I go to buy the car, and as a financial planner, like this question of should you buy it with cash or should you finance it, like it's a personal question, right? For that amount of money, like that's not going to have a massive impact in my financial long-term health. But like, I didn't want to pay cash. I didn't want to come up with that much cash. I didn't want to pull money out of the market. I don't have that much cash on hand at one time for car buying purposes. So I wanted to finance it. And salesperson quotes me a rate of 5.24% for a 72-month car loan. I'm thinking,
wait, 5.2? 5.2?
5.24. 5.24%.
Oh, okay. Cool. Sorry.
I'm thinking, great. I'm definitely going to finance this. Sure, I'll buy the slightly more expensive car because I can finance it at this, what I'm anchored to is a low rate, because I know that personal loans right now are 10, 11%. So I'm going, great, let's move forward. No problem. I'm only going to put $2,000 down. Cut to the next day, I go to pick up the car, sign in the paperwork. Now I'm in the finance department. Finance department guy goes, here's your monthly payment of whatever, 5 something. And I was like, excuse me? This is not the number we talked about yesterday. What's the interest rate? Pulls up the screen. Oh, it's 11.49%.
thought you were going to say like 6 or 7.
No. So I go, that's not what this person told me yesterday. And he's like, no, those are just estimates on our website. I'm like, no. I'm not talking about the estimate on your website. I'm talking about the conversation that I had with this person, and they wrote the number down. And the evidence was that he was holding the folder where she wrote the number down, 5.24%, and circled the payment amount. So now I'm pissed, right? And now I have this person trying to explain how the interest rate calculator on their website is just an estimate. And I'm going, I've never been to your website. I don't know what you're talking about. I sat here with a person in your dealership and they gave me a number. And now you're telling me my car is going to go from a total price with interest of like, I don't know, it was like 32,000 to like 42,000. Like, no, get fucked. Anyway, I should have
conversation is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I should have walked away, but I was so I was like, oh, what am I going to go do? Like, go to another dealership, deal with this shit all over again in like New Jersey. It's hard to buy a car in New York City. Anyway, long story short, I was very angry, and on top of that, my car wasn't even ready. And they're like, oh, we'll bring it to you tonight in like 4 hours. I was like, well, I'm going out of town right now. I literally bought this car to go on this trip. So anyway, long story short, they're reimbursing me for the rental car that I have now, and I'm going to pick it up on Thursday.
Oh, so you don't have it? Oh,
no, I don't have it. No, it wasn't ready. No, so they walked me to the Enterprise and rented a car for me.
That's so lame.
Yeah, it's pretty lame. So yeah, Bay Ridge, Honda, Mazda, avoid at all costs. But anyway.
You hear that, listener?
Anyway.
That's it. Live on the pod, 1-star review.
1-star review, folks. But the question of...
Will she put it on Google? Will she put it out there?
I don't know.
AJ famously does not leave bad reviews.
I can't. And I'm like, this person has a job and I don't want to ruin their lives. And I said my piece and ruined their day. I don't want to ruin... Anyway. Moral of the story here, though, did I make the right decision, right? So I ended up putting $7,500 down, and magically they checked another bank, and then the rate became like it was 8.79 is the rate we ended up at, and he kept saying like an 8%. I'm like, sir, 8.79 is not 8%. Stop saying 8%. 8.79, if anything, is 9%. But let's just say what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. What happened to Carvana? This industry is ripe for disruption.
AJ's been sitting in this angry Karen stew all weekend. The fact that you're in a rental car upstate right now, like every time you get into it, must remind you of this horrible experience.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have to go back there on Thursday to finish the paperwork. Fourth time. Yeah, I mean the first time was just shopping, so let's not count that. But yes, third time to make this purchase. Yeah. But look, should you finance a car? Like, should you take a loan out at 11% right now? Should you take a $20,000 loan out at 11% if you quote unquote don't have to? Meaning you have the cash somewhere else, or that cash is sitting is invested in the stock market in a brokerage account. And that was the dilemma I faced. And I kind of came up with the answer of, well, I don't want to sell stock right now. I looked at my portfolio. I called my financial advisor, John Owens. No, I didn't, but I would have, and said, like, would this be a good time to sell in my portfolio? I didn't really feel like calling John because I was so pissed. And I was like, I don't want to go through that bullshit. I don't want to pay cash right now. I was not comfortable putting that much cash into a car. So that was out of the question. And I came up with the answer that I took out the loan and there's no penalty to pay it off early. So I'm going to pay it off by the end of the year. So I'm not going to pay the full term of the loan. I'll pay a little bit of interest for 2 or 3 months. And with income coming in, I'll be able to pay that down by the end of the year. What would you have done? You would have walked away. Wow. I mean, any rational person would have walked away, but I was just like, I cannot go through this again with another dealership. So this is it.
I don't know if I would have walked away. I mean, you're already so deep in it at that point. You're just like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm paying this off in the next few months. So there's actually no interest rate on this. So like, sure.
I was texting with you angrily and you're like, why are you taking a loan out on this car? Yeah. And I kind of asked myself the same question. I don't know. That's like a lot of cash to just take off the table right now. Like, I don't know.
Well, you're renovating, you're doing renovations. So that's very cash heavy. And I get it.
My lifestyle inflation has gotten out of control. Let's just say that.
Well, there's not much more you can do. You got the house under control. You got the car now. You got the parking spot. I don't know where else. I guess we can get into more designer golf clothes, but We don't have another 7 minutes for your parking spot, lore.
All right. But I don't know. I think the answer for those other folks in this position is
well, we did
to borrow 11%, to borrow $20,000, $11% right now when you have the money elsewhere, and intend to pay all that interest off. Not a good call from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, I mean, if you can pay it in cash. I had the same thought. Remember when we bought the Subaru in 2020 and it was only $12,000, and I was like, let's just finance it. Like I'll put it on my credit. That way I'll have more diversity on my credit.
That was a nightmare.
And then we paid it off 1 month later because we had the cash. And then 3 years later, I go to sell the car, and they're like, you don't have the title because you have to contact the lender to let them know that you paid it off. I'm like, what do you mean? Chase Bank, I paid it off 3 years ago. What do you mean? And you have to send all this paperwork in, and I was in Mexico, and it's like all this paperwork that didn't happen needed to happen, and it was a nightmare. So if you can pay cash for a car, you can avoid all this. You can just... you always forget a deed is necessary for like anything that costs over like $10K. Like you need, I'm dealing with a boat right now as well. Like, I'm not good with deeds.
So, this begs the question. Can I actually, if I can't pay cash for it, can I afford it? It was an interesting thought that I had, which was like,
an appreciating asset like that.
Okay. Is like, of course, my husband was like, a budget of $15K for a car makes sense. And of course we spent way more than that because that's just what happens. But like in my head, I was like, if I were a client and I were advising my client, I would say, maybe you can't afford this car. Have you thought about something cheaper? And I know lots of folks, not so much in New York, but more LA, where you're in your car so much and a car is really important, or other cities where driving is important. People buy expensive cars that they kind of can't afford, right? I mean, if you're buying any kind of new car right now that's EV or whatever, we're talking $40,000 at least, right? So there's probably some financing going on. And based on the interest rates I saw yesterday, we're talking about a 9% interest rate. Like that's a bad deal.
Well, I mean, you make me think of this idea of like return on admin, right? Because like whether or not the car costs $5K or $50K, you got to deal with registration, license plates, the deed, the loan, all of that stuff. So it's like, it's all the same. You got to pay your insurance, and like some of them they don't auto renew your insurance, or your credit card will expire. And then before you know it, you got a notice in the mail that you haven't paid your insurance in a few months. Or is this just me? Oh, okay.
Just you. It's just you, dude. No, it's not. It's not just you. We all have shades of that. You know, if you move once, like you're gonna
return on admin.
Yeah. I mean, you have it like I would say 50% worse than most people.
Yeah.
And I would say that's 25% like you, and like 75% like your chosen lifestyle, right? Like you're always moving around. So like I only blame you 25% for your shitstorm of paperwork nightmares.
Yeah, I mean it's self-inflicted for sure, but it creates a pretty interesting life. Talking to some people at camp last week, like how's the last year been? And I just catch them up, and they're like, their eyes are just glazed over. Like, yeah, I've been in Boston, still working for Amazon. Like, cool, same girlfriend. I'm like, word, that was easy. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm ready for that, for the simplification. A lot higher ROA, return on admin.
Yeah,
something of that nature.
I love everything's better when it's simple, I believe.
Also, there's this idea of like, yeah, it's a $5,000 car. Like, what's the worst that could happen? I lose $5,000 if like somebody smashes into it. Or
that's what I'm saying. Like, the more money you're spending, like the greater the losses. Like now I'm invested in this car, and now like whatever. Anyway.
Yeah, they say the things you own end up owning you, AJ.
Speaking of which, my kitchen renovations, they look amazing, worth every penny.
I love how you heard that and just bounced it right back. All right. You want to close us out? I think that's
let's wrap it up, you guys. So yeah, Millennials, we're doing just fine. Thank you for listening. You can always email us your financial problems, liquidityevent@brooklynfi.com, or just leave a comment on Instagram. Like, we love your questions. We're happy to answer them live. If you text us, we will also answer it live on the pod. Great hanging out with you, Shane, as always. See you next week.